Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning everyone. How are you today? I hope you all in a good condition. The Honorable Lecturer, Mr. Yusuf Supriyono, and all my beloved friends. First of all, let us thanks to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala because of His blessing. We are able to join in today's math class. And we are from group 2. My name is Halihani Fandarto with my ID number 2021 201 and 3 as your moderator today. And the presentation today is about the linguistics of second language acquisition. Well, everyone, let's just go to the presentation session. For the first turn will be delivered by Witri Bella. For Witri, time is yours.
My name is Witri Bella Nursifa. I will present material about the nature of language. First, let's identify the characteristic of language naturally. Alright, most linguists would agree that all naturally occurring language share these characteristics. The first, language are systematic. It means that language consists of recurrent elements which occur in regular patterns of relationship. They are created according to rules or principles which speakers are usually unconscious of using or knowing it, and we can understand them because we understand the principles by which the words are combined to express meaning. The second, language are symbolic. It means that sequences of sound or letters do not inherently possess meaning. The meaning of symbols in a language comes through the agreement of a group of speakers, and it is meaningful for the speaker who uses for say that language. And the third, language are social. It means that each language reflects the social requirement of the society that uses it, and there is no standard for judging whether one language is more effective for communication than another. We use language to communicate, to categorize and catalog the object, events, and processes of human experience. Next, linguists traditionally divide a language into different levels for description and analysis. Even though in actual use all levels must interact and function simultaneously, the human accomplishment of learning language seems all the more remarkable when we consider even a simplified list of the areas of knowledge which every first language or second language learners must acquire at these different levels. As you can see on the table, there are lexicon or vocabulary, phonology or sound system, morphology or word structure, syntax or grammar, nonverbal structure, and discourse. All of this knowledge about language is automatically available to children for their first language and is somehow usually acquired with no conscious effort. And next, early approaches to SLA, or second language acquisition. Constructive analysis, or CA, is an approach to the study of SLA, which involves predicting and explaining learners' problems based on a comparison of first language and second language to determine similarities and differences. The pioneer is Robert Lado, and CA influenced by theory structuralism and behaviorism. Early proponents of CA assumed that language acquisition essentially involves habit formation in a process of stimulus response and reinforcement. They imitate and repeat the language that they heard. And when they are reinforced for this response, learning occurs. The implication is that practice makes perfect. Another assumption of this theory is that there will be transfer in learning, wherein called positive when the same structure is appropriate in both language, and negative when the first language structure is used inappropriately in the second language. The process of CA involves describing first language and second language at each level, analyze the language in order to predict the problems that are most likely to occur, create language lessons based on those predicted difficulties, and we sequences our lesson in order of difficulty. Alright, that's all. For the next material will be delivered by Rahma.
Thank you for the opportunity. I will continue to the next material. Constructive analysis has the drawback of being unable to clarify the logical issue of learning a language. Another issue was the fact that the CA analyses weren't always supported by data from real linguistics. Numerous L2 issues that CA predicated do not materialize. Our analysis places an internal emphasis on students' inventiveness in language construction. Instead of predictions like in CA, it is based on the description and analysis of actual learners' error in L2. Some presumptions about EA hold that the child is an active and imaginative participant in the process rather than a passive recipient of language stimulation, and that inner process or interaction with the environment may motivate learning. Instead than focusing on how they are deficient in comparison to adult norms, description and analysis of the structures of child language production have started to focus on them as grammatical systems in and of themselves. The final assertion made by Corder was that mistakes reveal the language system that a learner is using at any given stage of L2 growth, as well as the techniques or method it is employing during his discovery of the language. Additionally, as you can see in this slide, information regarding the method or process and the issues with error analysis is provided. Interlanguage describes the stage at which a learner's language is transitioning to the target L2. As you can see on the slide, an interlanguage has traits like systemic, dynamic, variable, and reduced system. Selinker 1972 further emphasizes that there are distinctions between L1 development in SLA and L1 acquisition by children, including several cognitive processes. First, L1 to L2 language transfer. Second, transfer of training or the method used to teach L2. Third, second language acquisition strategies or how students approach the L2 resources and the job of L2 learning. Fourth, second language communication techniques or methods that learners attempt to interact with people in the L2. Fifth, overgeneralization of linguistics information in the target language, wherein learned L2 norms are applied too widely. Studies on morpheme order. Morpheme order questioned whether or not L2 had a natural order similar to L1. The list of morphemes that were mentioned in Brown 1973 and Dulay and Byrne is shown below. The rewarded order of morpheme acquisition in L1 was similar, though not identical, and L2 additionally the occurrence of such a natural order changed arguments in favor of internally motivated acquisition processes because the second was essentially the same in English L2. From me, sorry if I have a mistakes. Thank you. I'll give it back to the moderator.
Alright, thanks to Rahma, and I will explain about monitor model, universal grammar, initial state, and nature and development of interlanguage. Alright, monitor language. Monitor model proposed by Stephen Krashen 1978 It explicitly and essentially adopts the notions of language acquisition device, or LAD, which is a metaphor Chomsky used for children's innate knowledge of language. Stephen Krashen, 1978, approach of 5 hypotheses forming the model. There are: number 1 is acquisition learning hypothesis. Acquisition is subconscious and involves the innate language acquisition device, which accounts for children's L1. Learning is conscious and is exemplified by the L2 learning, which takes place in many classroom contexts. Number 2 is monitor hypothesis. What is learned is available only as a monitor for purposes of editing or making changes in what has already been produced. Number 3 is natural order hypothesis. We acquire the rules of language in a predictable order. Number 4 is input hypothesis. Language acquisition takes place because there is comprehensible input. And the last one is number 5, affective filter hypothesis. Input may not be processed if the affective filter is inhibited. And the next is universal grammar. So, Chomsky and his followers have argued that children, at least, come to the task of acquiring a specific language already possessing general knowledge of what all languages have in common, including constraints on how any natural language can be structured. And what all languages have in common is universal grammar about principles and parameters. Since around 1980, the construct called universal grammar has been conceptualized as a set of principles which are properties of a language in the world. Some of these principles contain parameters or point where there is a limited choices of settings depending on which specific language is involved. Alright, the next is universal grammar and SLA. L2 learners may still have access to universal grammar in the initial state of SLA as well as knowledge of L1, but there is no agreement on this. There are 4 possibilities have been suggested, as you can see on the screen, and those are according to Cook in 1988. And then next material is nature and development of interlanguage. The first is interlanguage, or EL, is defined in the principles and parameters perspective as intermediate states of L2 development, which is compatible with the notion of EL as interism grammars that was introduced in the 1960s and 1970s. If at least some access to universal grammar is retained by L2 learners, then the process of EL development is in large part one of resetting parameters on the basis of input in the new language. And the second is contourism, an approach to SLA which has been formulated within Chomsky's minimalist programs considers EL development as the progressive mastery of L2 vocabulary along with the morphological features, which specify word form, that are part of lexical knowledge. And then final state, while the question of why some learners are more successful than others is not relevant for basic L1 acquisition, Since all children are achieve a native, the question is highly relevant for SLA. Approaches to this topic needed to account for the great variability which is found in the ultimate level of attainment by L2 learners. There are several possibilities within the universal grammar framework as you can see on the screen. And then maybe that's all I can say. For the next material will be delivered by Redita. For Redita, time is yours and thank you.
Here I will continue the material about functional approaches. The term function in linguistics has two meanings. There is structural function and pragmatic function. Structural functions such as the role which elements of language structure play as a subject or object, or as an actor or goals. And pragmatic function is about what the use of language can accomplish, such as convey information, control others' behavior, or express emotions. Besides, there are four of the functional approaches which have been influential in SLA, such as systematic linguistics, functional typology, and information organization. Systemic linguistics. Systemic linguistics has been developed by Holliday beginning in the late 1950s. This is a model for analyzing language in the terms of the interrelated system of choice that are available for expressing meaning. Holliday, 1975, describes the evolution of following pragmatic functions and early L1 acquisitions. He called them functions of language as a whole, which are universal for children. There are instrumental language used as a means of getting things done, or the I want function. And the next is regulatory language used to regulate the behavior of others, or the do as I tell you function. And then the next is instructional use of language in interaction between self and others, or the me and you function. And then the next is personal awareness of language as a form of one's own identity, or the here I come function. Next is heuristic language as a way of learning about things, or the tell me why function. The next is imagination creation through language of a world of one's own making, or the let's pretend function. The next is representational means self-expression, proposition, or communicating about something, or the I've got something to tell you function. And the next is functional typology, a particularly important concept which is tied to this account is markedness. The nation of markedness deal with whether any specific features of a language is marked or unmarked. And features is unmarked if it occurs more frequently than a constructing element in the same category. If it is less complex structurally or conceptually, or if it's more normal or expected along some other dimension. The concept applies to all levels of linguistic analysis, such as in phonology, vocabulary, syntax, and in discourse. I think that's enough from me. I give it to the next presenter. Thank you.
Alright, thank you for the opportunity. Here I will explain about function to form mapping. So basic concept for this perspective is that acquisition of both L1 and L2 involves the process of grammaticalization in which a grammatical function is first conveyed by shared extra-linguistic knowledge and inferencing based on the context of discourse, then by a lexical word, and only later by a grammatical marker. Contohnya seperti misalnya kita bertanya ke learner English beginner tentang apa yang mereka kemarin lakukan. Lalu dia mungkin akan menjawab, I play football. But jika kita bertanya ke advanced learner, dia mungkin akan menjawab, yesterday I play football. Dan jika kita bertanya yang lebih advance, mungkin dia akan menjawab, I played football. Selanjutnya, information organization, where it refers to a functional approach which focus on utterance structure or the way in which learners put their words together. Yang pertama ada developmental levels. So all of the learners in this study, no matter what their L1 and L2, go through a remarkably similar sequence of development in their interlanguage. Di mana yang pertama ada nominal utterance organization. Learners generally begin with the seemingly unconnected naming of subjects and objects. They may also use adverbs and adjectives or other elements, but rarely use a verb to help organize an utterance. The second is infinite utterance organization. So learners increasingly add verbs to their utterance, but they rarely use grammatical morphemes to convey the meaning of tense, persons, or number. And the last is finite utterance organization, where learners who continue interlanguage development beyond the IUO level next add grammatical morphemes to the verb. And the last is organizing principle. So there is a limited set of principles which learners make use of for organizing information, and it may be classified as follows. The first is phrasal constraints or restriction on the phrasal patterns which may be used. Second is semantic constraints or features of categories like noun phrase which determine their position in a sentence and what case role they are assigned. And the last is pragmatic constraints, including restrictions that relate to what has been said previously or to what the speaker assumes that the hearer already knows. And now we've come to the conclusion that our SLA is largely a matter of learning new linguistic forms to fulfill the same function as already acquired and used in L1. And what is being acquired in SLA is a system for conveying meaning, and next, how language is acquired importantly involves creative learner involvement in communication. And last, understanding SLA process is impossible if the art is isolated for circumstances of use. And here is the book that we cited for this presentation. I think that's all the presentation from our group. We would like to say sorry if there are any mistakes. If you have any question, you can ask us directly. Thank you so much for your great attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.